I never expected her to remember my name, let alone the way I took my tea. It was past 10 when I knocked on her door, late enough that the street had already gone quiet, the kind of silence where even your footsteps feel intrusive. I almost turned back twice. The plastic bag in my hand crinkled too loudly every time I adjusted my grip. Inside was a phone charger. Mine, apparently. Missing for 3 months. I'd found it while cleaning my apartment, tangled with old receipts and a movie ticket I didn't remember using. Her son's name was still saved in my contact from university days, but we hadn't spoken since graduation. Somehow, returning the charger felt easier than texting him. The porch light flicked on before I could change my mind. She opened the door wearing a loose gray sweater and reading glasses she pushed up into her hair almost immediately, like she'd forgotten they were there. "Oh," she said softly, "you're wait." Her eyes narrowed just slightly, searching. "Hamzare?" I nodded, surprised enough that I forgot to smile. "Yeah, sorry. I think I left this here months ago." I held up the bag. She looked at it, then at me, and laughed under her breath. "You came all this way for a charger." There wasn't a good answer. I shrugged. I was nearby. I wasn't. She stepped aside anyway. "Well, you can't return something and leave immediately. That's rude." Her living room smelled faintly of chamomile tea and furniture polish. Nothing had changed since university. Same couch, same framed photos, same ticking wall clock that always sounded louder than it should. Except her. Not older exactly, just quieter, like someone who had learned to lower their voice even when alone. She motioned toward the sofa. I sat carefully, knees close together, folding the edge of a napkin left on the coffee table, without realizing I was doing it. She noticed. She noticed everything. "You still do that," she said. "Do what?" "Fidget when you don't know what to say." I laughed once, embarrassed. "I guess some things stick." She poured tea into 2 mismatched cups without asking if I wanted any. Somehow, she remembered anyway. "No sugar." I watched her hands while she moved, slow, precise movements, the sleeve of her sweater slipping down her wrist. There was a thin silver ring I didn't remember seeing before. Or maybe I'd never paid attention back then. University visits blurred together now. We were always loud, always distracted. She had just been my friend's mom, someone passing through rooms with snacks and reminders about exams. But sitting there, the house quiet, her son miles away living his own life, I noticed how silence followed her instead of noise. "So," she said, sitting across from me, "what brings you out this late, really?" The question lingered longer than it should have. I stared into the tea. I guess. I didn't want to go home yet. She didn't respond right away. Just nodded, like she understood something I hadn't explained. Outside, a motorcycle passed. The clock ticked. She smiled faintly. Late nights feel different when the house is empty. It wasn't flirtation. Not even close. Just recognition. And somehow that felt worse. We talked about small things, work, traffic, mutual acquaintances who had already moved on with their lives. Conversation drifted, paused, restarted. A few times we both spoke at once and stopped, laughing awkwardly. At one point our eyes met and stayed there a second too long. She looked away first, reaching for her cup even though it was still full. I realized then how long it had been since someone listened without checking their phone. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. "You should visit again," she said casually, almost like an afterthought. "You're always welcome here." I nodded, unsure why the words landed heavier than they should. Outside, the air felt colder. I had just reached my car when my phone buzzed. A message from her. "You forgot your scarf." I looked down. I wasn't wearing one when I arrived. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the screen, wondering if she knew exactly what she was doing, or if I was the only one who felt something quietly shifting. I told myself I wasn't going back. That was the plan the next morning. Wake up, go to work, forget the strange warmth of her living room and the even stranger message about the scarf. Except the scarf really was there, folded neatly on my passenger seat when I checked again. I still don't know when she put it there. 3 days passed before I found another excuse. Her son texted me out of nowhere about old class notes, and somehow the conversation ended with, "You should drop by my place sometime. Mom's always home anyway." I stared at that message longer than necessary. It felt official, permitted. which somehow made it worse. She opened the door before I knocked this time. "I thought that might be you," she said, smiling like she'd been expecting the sound of my footsteps specifically. I held up a small box of pastries. "Peace offering." "For what?" "For returning things late, I guess." She laughed softly and let me in. The house was brighter in the afternoon. Sunlight fell across the dining table, revealing small details I hadn't noticed before. Unopened mail stacked carefully, a chair slightly pulled out like someone had stood up mid-conversation and never returned. She made tea again. No questions asked. We sat closer this time, not across the room, but side by side at the table. Our shoulders didn't touch, but the space between us felt intentional. "So," she said, stirring her cup slowly, "do you still talk to him? Your son?" I asked. She nodded. "Sometimes. Everyone's busy now." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That happens. Children grow up faster than parents expect." The word parents lingered between us. I suddenly became aware of how strange this looked. Me sitting here alone with my friend's mother, sharing tea on a quiet weekday afternoon like it was routine. I imagined explaining it to someone else and immediately felt defensive, even though nothing had happened. She broke the silence first. "I got divorced last year." She said it simply, like stating the weather. I didn't know where to look. "I'm sorry." "It's all right." She shrugged lightly. Some endings arrive long before people admit them. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. A small habit, repetitive, almost absent-minded. I noticed a faint indentation where a ring must have been worn for years. "I thought the house would feel peaceful," she added. "But sometimes it's just quiet in a way that echoes." I nodded before realizing I was doing it too quickly. "I get that," I said. "My apartment feels loud even when nothing's happening." She glanced at me, curious. "Loud?" "Yeah, like unfinished conversations. Messages I almost send." I laughed awkwardly. "It sounds stupid when I say it out loud." "It doesn't," she said gently. Her gaze stayed on me longer than before. Not evaluating, not maternal. Just present. And I felt seen in a way that made me sit straighter, like I needed to deserve the attention. We talked about small memories after that. University stories. Her son's terrible cooking attempts. The time I'd accidentally broken a lamp during a study session and blamed it on the cat. She laughed harder than the story deserved, wiping the corner of her eye. "You were always polite," she said, "even when everyone else was loud." I shrugged. I didn't think anyone noticed. I noticed. The room fell quiet again. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere a neighbor's gate creaked. She stood to clear the cups, and I followed automatically, helping carry them to the kitchen. Our hands brushed when she reached for the same plate. Neither of us pulled away immediately. It wasn't romantic. Not exactly. Just warm. Human. Unnecessary to acknowledge. She smiled, small, almost private, and handed me a dish towel. "Dry these," she said. I did, standing beside her in comfortable silence, like we had done this 100 times before. When I finally left, she walked me to the door again. "Thank you for visiting," she said. It sounded sincere, almost relieved. As I stepped outside, she added lightly, "You make the house feel less empty." I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I started going there without needing a reason. That was the first mistake. Sometimes I brought groceries she hadn't asked for. Sometimes I stopped by after work just for tea. Once, I showed up because it had started raining and her street was closer than my apartment. Each visit felt accidental. Each one less accidental than the last. That evening, she was in the kitchen when I arrived, sleeves rolled higher than usual, flour dusted lightly across the counter. "You came at the right time," she said. "I'm fighting with dough." I smiled. "Need backup." She handed me a rolling pin without hesitation, like I belonged there. We worked side by side, shoulders occasionally brushing as we moved around the small kitchen. The radio played softly in the background, an old song neither of us acknowledged but didn't turn off. Domestic. Too domestic. I noticed it and immediately tried not to. "You're here a lot lately," she said casually, eyes on the dough. The words landed gently but carried weight. I paused. "Is that bad?" "No." She shook her head quickly. "Just unexpected." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, but aware. I wiped flour from my hands, suddenly self-conscious. I imagined her son walking through the door, freezing at the sight of us cooking together. The thought made my stomach tighten. I stepped back slightly. "I don't want this to be strange," I said. She stopped rolling. For a moment, she didn't move at all. "It isn't strange," she replied, though her voice softened at the edges. "People visit. People talk." But she avoided looking at me. That was new. The interruption came an hour later. Her phone rang on the counter. She glanced at the screen and hesitated before answering. "Yes," she said, turning slightly away. I pretended to focus on stacking plates, but I caught enough. Her son's voice, faint through the speaker, asking when she'd last seen me. She laughed lightly. Too lightly. "Oh, he stops by sometimes," she said. "Just being polite." Polite. The word stayed with me after she hung up. She placed the phone down carefully, exhaling as if she hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. "You don't have to explain me," I said. Her eyes lifted immediately. I wasn't explaining. Another pause. Then she added quietly, "I just don't want things to become complicated." There it was. The boundary neither of us had named. I nodded, though something inside me resisted agreeing. "Yeah, of course." I reached for my jacket earlier than usual. She noticed. "You're leaving already." "I should," I said. "Long day tomorrow." Neither of us moved toward the door right away. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly. The ticking wall clock louder. My thoughts looping, "Stay, go, say something, don't." She stepped closer, brushing flour from my sleeve. A simple gesture. Familiar. Careful. Her hand lingered longer than necessary. I looked down at her fingers, then at her face. She realized how close we were at the same moment I did. Her breath caught, barely audible. For a second, everything slowed. The radio humming. The faint smell of baked bread. Her eyes searching mine like she was deciding something she wasn't ready to admit. I leaned forward without fully meaning to. Not a decision, just momentum. She didn't move away, but she didn't move closer either. A suspended moment. Half a step from something irreversible. Then she inhaled sharply and turned her head, just enough for the spell to break. "We should," she murmured, not finishing the sentence. I nodded, even though I didn't know what we were agreeing to. At the door, she handed me my jacket like she always did. Our fingers touched again, briefly, deliberately avoided afterward. "Drive safely," she said. I walked to my car feeling like I'd almost said something important and lost the words halfway there. And for the first time since all of this began, I wondered if she was trying to protect me, or herself. White heavy checkmark, prompt 5. The twist, raising the stakes again, 500 words, writing prompt. Introduce a twist or complication that delays resolution. Instructions, someone changes their behavior unexpectedly. She pulls away, he stops showing up. Reveals something that wasn't said. An X, a child, emotional baggage. Let the character experience emotional whiplash. Hope, confusion, withdrawal. Don't resolve the conflict. Instead, sit in the ambiguity. End with a message unsent, a door not knocked, or a seat left empty. Reflective pivot line. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I didn't answer her question. Not properly. The words existed somewhere inside me. Honest ones, reckless ones, but they stayed trapped behind hesitation. Instead, I said something safe. "I don't know." She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that. We sat there a little longer, neither of us touching, both aware of how close we had come to changing everything. Eventually she stood first, brushing invisible dust from her coat. "I should go," she said gently. "No hug. No lingering gudvie." Just distance, chosen carefully. I watched her walk away across the park, resisting the urge to call her back. The bench felt colder after she left, as if the space beside me still remembered her warmth. That should have been the moment things settled. Instead, everything shifted. She stopped replying the same way. Her messages became shorter. Polite. Delayed. Busy today. Maybe another time. Take care. No invitations. No late-night conversations. I told myself she was doing the right thing. I told myself I respected it. But every evening around 10, I still caught myself listening for a notification that didn't come. I passed her street once and didn't slow down. The house lights were on. I kept driving. A week later, I ran into her son at a grocery store. He greeted me loudly, clapping my shoulder like nothing in the world carried weight. "Man, you disappeared," he laughed. "Mom said you used to visit sometimes." "Used to." The word hit strangely. "Yeah," I said carefully. "Been busy." He nodded, tossing snacks into his cart. "She's been weird lately anyway. My dad's been calling more. Think they might be talking again." I blinked. "Talking? Yeah. Nothing serious, probably. You know how parents are." He shrugged and moved on to another aisle, unaware of how casually he'd rearranged my thoughts. Her ex-husband, a possibility I had never truly considered. That night, I opened our chat window again. I typed, "Are you okay?" Deleted it. Typed again, "Did I do something wrong?" Deleted that too. The cursor blinked patiently, waiting for courage I wasn't sure I had the right to use. I imagined her sitting at the dining table, phone face down beside a cup of tea, growing cold. I imagined her choosing distance deliberately, not because she didn't feel something, but because she did, and maybe because she knew where it could lead better than I did. Days stretched. I stopped passing by, stopped checking if her car was outside, stopped expecting messages. But absence has its own presence. It fills rooms differently. Even silence feels intentional. One evening, I walked past the park bench where we talked. Someone else sat there now, laughing into a phone call. Life continuing without hesitation. I stood for a moment longer than necessary, hands in my pockets, unsure what I was waiting for. My phone vibrated once. A notification from her chat. My heart jumped before I even opened it. It wasn't a message. Just her profile picture changing. A new photo, taken indoors, soft lighting, a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. I typed her name, paused, locked the phone again. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life had started a sentence between us and then quietly forgotten how to finish it. It happened on a Tuesday evening. No warning. No dramatic build-up. Just a message after weeks of silence. "Are you home?" I stared at the screen longer than I should have. My first instinct was not relief, it was caution. Like touching something fragile after convincing yourself it was already broken. "Yes," I replied. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Can I come by?" When I opened my apartment door, she was already standing there, hands tucked in her coat pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. Seeing her outside my place felt different. Wrong and right at the same time. "Hi," she said. Her voice carried hesitation I'd never heard before. Neither of us moved for a second. Then I stepped aside and let her in. My apartment wasn't prepared for guests. A mug sat in the sink, books stacked unevenly on the table, a blanket thrown across the couch. She looked around quietly, taking it in without judgment. "It suits you," she said. I almost laughed. Messy. Lived in. I made tea automatically. Same routine. Reversed roles. The kettle filled the silence with soft noise while neither of us knew how to begin. She sat at the small kitchen table, fingers tracing the edge like she used to do at home. "I didn't come to confuse you again," she said finally. I placed a cup in front of her and sat down across from her. "Then why did you come?" She took a breath, slow, deliberate. "My ex wants to try again," she said. The words landed exactly as I expected and still managed to hurt. I nodded once, staring at the steam rising from my tea. "That makes sense," I said carefully. She watched my reaction closely. "I thought it would feel like relief," she continued. "Familiar. Safe." A pause. But all I could think about was the park, and how quiet it felt when you didn't come anymore. My fingers tightened around the cup. She looked down, gathering courage piece by piece. I pulled away because I was afraid, she admitted. Not people judging. Not my son finding out. Her voice softened. "I was afraid I needed you more than I should." The honesty sat between us, fragile but undeniable. I exhaled slowly. "I stayed away because I thought you chose someone else," I said. "And I didn't want to make things harder for you." She shook her head gently. "You didn't make anything harder." Silence followed. Not empty this time, just full. I noticed how tired she looked, how carefully she was holding herself together. "I don't know what the right decision is," she said. "I only know I miss talking to you. I missed feeling understood." I leaned back slightly, letting the words settle before answering. I never wanted to take anything from your life, I said. But pretending this didn't matter, that didn't work either. Her eyes softened. For the first time, neither of us looked away. No rusing, no urgency, just acknowledgement. She reached across the table slowly, resting her hand over mine. Warm, steady, intentional, not romantic, not innocent either. Real. I needed to see you, she whispered. Before deciding who I am again, I turned my hand slightly, letting our fingers rest together. No promises, no future discussed, just presence. After a moment, she smiled faintly, tired but genuine. Okay, she asked softly. I nodded. Okay. Time didn't change everything at once. It adjusted things quietly. Like furniture moved slightly each day until the room felt different without anyone remembering when it happened. She didn't go back to her ex-husband. There was no dramatic confrontation, no speeches about love or destiny. Just a conversation she described later as finally honest. Old patterns didn't feel safe anymore. Familiarity wasn't enough once she understood what loneliness had really felt like. We didn't rush toward each other either. For weeks after that night, we moved carefully, meeting for walks instead of long visits, coffee instead of late evenings, conversations that stayed grounded in ordinary life. We learned each other again without hiding behind hesitation. Sometimes we met at the same park bench, where everything almost changed. The jacaranda tree shed purple petals that gathered around our shoes. We talked about work, groceries, annoying neighbors, small things that somehow felt important because they were shared. Once she laughed and said, "We skipped the dramatic part people usually start with." I told her maybe we started where most stories end, after people already knew loss. She liked that. My routines shifted without announcement. Mornings began earlier. I stopped drinking instant coffee and learned how she liked hers. Black, strong, no sugar. She teased me for pretending to enjoy tea just because she did. I noticed, she said one morning. You notice everything, I replied. She didn't deny it. Her house slowly stopped feeling forbidden. I visited when her son was home, sometimes too. Conversations normal and uncomplicated. Nothing hidden, nothing performed. Just time passing naturally until presence stopped needing explanation. The tension that once filled every silence softened into familiarity. We cooked together again one evening, the same kitchen where we almost crossed a line months before. This time there was no fear in standing close, no sudden pulling away. Just shared movements, quiet cooperation, comfortable pauses. At 8:47 a.m. one Sunday, I found her sitting at the dining table with sunlight falling across her face, reading glasses balanced at the edge of her nose. She looked up when I walked in. You're early, she said. You said mornings feel less lonely with company. She smiled, not surprised, just warm. It wasn't passion that settled between us. It was steadiness. The kind that grows slowly enough you barely notice it becoming essential. We never officially named what we were. There was no moment where love was declared or defined. Instead, it showed itself in smaller ways. Remembering appointments, leaving lights on, saving the last cup of tea. One evening, while walking past the park bench again, she slipped her hand into mine without looking at me. No hesitation, no question, just certainty earned over time. I squeezed her fingers gently, and we kept walking. Later that night, sitting side by side at her living room, the same ticking clock marking the quiet, she leaned her head against my shoulder. You know, she said softly, nothing about this feels dramatic anymore. I nodded. It just feels right. Outside, the streets settled into evening silence. The same silence that once felt heavy, now softened by shared presence. I realized then that we hadn't crossed a line. We had built a new one together, slowly, carefully, until it felt like home. And sometimes, when she pours tea without asking and I fold a napkin without noticing, we exchange a small smile. The kind that says we both remember how close we came to losing this before it even began. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?